Yeah, welcome to the Aro Benaiah Show, the podcast where we highlight the stories, struggles, and strategy of local entrepreneurs and small business leaders. Today, I'm joined by Roger Pearson, an entrepreneur with over 50 years of experience creating, selling, and managing business since 2001. Roger has worked as a master tax advisor and IRS enroll agent, helping small business owners avoid costly mistakes, keeping more of their profits, and build solid foundation for success. In this conversation, we explore the reality of tax, business structures, and financial education, and why every entrepreneur, no matter their trade, needs to understand this education, and why every entrepreneur, no matter their trade, need to understand these fundamentals to truly thrive. You don't want to miss this. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
So Roger, what was it like growing up for you?
Well, I grew up in the Midwest, and I've lived all over the country here, from the Midwest to the Northeast, and now I'm, of course, in the Southeast. And I started my business adventures when I was 20 years old, and I'm 75 now, so I've been at it for a while. And I've tried a lot of different things and made a lot of mistakes. But when I was growing up, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anybody to really teach me how to build a business, and I just kind of winged it as I went. And of course, winging it, you make a lot of mistakes. And the other problem is that in this country, there really wasn't any place you could go learn how to run a business. I mean, even in some of the tax classes I was teaching for several years, I would have business business college majors come to my classes. And they came up to me and they said, we tried to ask questions like you're teaching to our college professors, and they tell us that, well, we don't teach that here. You have to go learn that someplace else.
Well,
And I'm going, how is that possible? But they got people, the colleges, they get people ready for the corporate world, the Fortune 500, not for the small business people, but it's the small business people that are the backbone of the economy. Yeah, I don't care what country you're in. It's the small business people that are the backbone of the economy. And so it's a shame that has happened. And that's one of the things that I've set out to try to rectify in my small way by educating people, by having classes, by doing online courses, my podcast. I wrote books on the subject to teach people the stuff they need to know to set up a business properly.
wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. It's really inspiring that you're advocating for small business and you're reaching out certain trainings, reaching out to podcast. And I think it's really, really amazing to hear this from you.
Well, there's three major things that I don't care what country you're in. There's three things that you have to, because you have to deal with government,
Yeah.
whatever your government is, in whatever country you're is. You have to deal with taxes. You have to deal with legal formats, and you have to know how to organize yourself properly. So I call it the three pillars of building a solid foundation under your business. You have to know all the legal formats of your country. You have to know how to organize and keep accounting records and how to organize yourself there, or your business will spiral out of control. And you have to know the tax consequences of your choices. Those three things work together. And you can't have one without the other. And a lot of people, that's what people really don't realize, is how those three things work together to build that solid foundation under your business and give you the best chance for success.
Yeah.
That's my mission.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roger. So in 2001, you actually made the switch into tax advising. What actually inspired you that transition?
Well, that was an interesting story. In the 1990s, I decided to quit working for myself and go back into corporate management. And I worked for 3 years doing software support for IBM. Okay, and at the end of about 3, I'd worked up to I just started out as a technician on the phone, and I'd worked myself up to a nice middle management position. And suddenly I was called in one day and said, well, we've eliminated your position and all the managers on your level are gone. Thank you very much. I said, whoa. Well, then I got myself a management job at a document management company, scanning documents, because this was the decade where we were starting to convert everything to computers. and get rid of paper,
Yeah.
And so I they had two teenage kids running the department when I went in. And 3 years later, I'd built it up to 22 employees, just that division, and doing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year when a new comptroller came in and decided to place all the managers in the entire place with his people. So, thank you very much. I said, okay. So then I got another job for another document management company that was a software company. It was a new one, and they were developing software for this field. And 2 years later, we found out that the president of this company was taking all the investors' money and paying off his own bills with it instead of investing it in the company. And the investors found out and they said, no, you're not getting any more money. And it was closed. So I says, I was downsized 3 times in 10 years. And I says, I don't know what the hell I want to do. So my sister-in-law says, well, I've been doing taxes during tax season for a major company here in the United States. And why don't you go take a tax class, go do it, during tax season, which is, of course, from January 1st through April 15th here. And until you find out what you want to do, until you want to decide. And the strange thing happened, and this is what life is all about, strange things, is that I enjoyed the hell out of it. I really, really liked it. And because of my business background, I specialized in doing business returns. And so here I am. I'm about to go into my 24th season of doing tax returns. And I have over 500 clients, and many, many, many of those are small businesses. So life is strange. It just throws things at you. And if you roll with the punches, you never know what you might find. So now I'm at the point where, well, I'm coming up on 25 years of doing taxes, and I'm 75, and maybe it's time to retire and do something else, So I've made it my mission to go back into education because there's 2 things I love to do, and that's teach. I was an education major when I was in college, but they had me student teaching at the public schools, and I says, I'd get fired every year because people have no clue what they're doing. And it was back when they threw out the regular math. They had the new math where 2 and 2 could equal 5, and they threw out phonics because they said, oh, that didn't work, and that was a disaster. So they had to put that back in. I says, I can't do this. I can't work for the government, teaching. And I've taught many, many places in the corporate world since then. But and the other thing I love to do is create. So I've come to the point where I've taken my love of teaching and my love of creating and started doing that. So I'm creating by writing books. I'm creating by doing podcasts. I'm creating by doing online courses. I'm teaching by helping small business people succeed. And so now I'm retiring into things, and I'll probably never retire, but I'm going to another phase of my life, for the next couple decades. So it's an interesting journey. It really is.
Amazing. Thank you, Roger. So what is one mistake from your own early business journey that shaped how you advise others today?
Well, I think the biggest thing is over the last over 2 decades of working with small business people, I came to realize all the mistakes that I made along the way, and helping people fix the mistakes they're making. And for me to help people fix their mistakes, I had to get better at learning the art of business. And so that's what I've done for the last couple of decades. I've learned the art of business, and I can look back and see all the mistakes I made, all the stupid things I did, and I've gotten really good at, helping people get out of situations that they've gotten themselves into as far as in taxes and legal formats and everything else. And that knowledge that I've gained over the last 2 decades working with dozens and dozens of business people has led me to where I am now.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you for that. And why is building a strong business foundation so important, especially for small business and blue collar entrepreneurs?
Well, the sad facts are that, and it varies from year to year, but over 3/4 of people that start a small business will fail. And it's because they just think they can go out and can just hit the ground running. Oh, I'll start a landscaping business. I'll just go start mowing and go eating class and start mowing, but they don't realize all the implications of what it takes to run a business. Because they've never done one before. They just gung ho and they go out, and then they come and do their taxes for the first time, and they find out that they have to give 25% of their profit to the government, and some states is up to 50%, believe it or not, and they freak out because there was nobody to teach them these things. And it's frustrating to me that they have to get themselves into the situation. Sometimes I can get them out of it by using the law. One thing about the government and taxes, for every law, there's an exception to the law, practically. And it's the good person knows all the exceptions to the law to help their clients. You know, I tell people the worst thing I could be, the worst profession I could be would be an accountant. I could think of nothing more boring in my life. I mean, I'm good at it, but I could think of nothing more boring. And so, well, they say, well, isn't that what you do when you're doing people's taxes? And I says, no, 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 no. What I'm doing, it's a game. It's a game. It's how to use the government's rules and exceptions against the government to benefit my client.
Yeah.
So it's like a chess game, you know. And I think that's one reason I've enjoyed it so much too. It's all a chess game,
Wow.
you know.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you for that. So you often mention three aspects of building business foundation. Can you actually break those down for us?
Ah, well, for instance, here in the United States, the first thing you have to do is your legal format, whether you're just a sole proprietor, small business person, whether you're in partnership with other people, or whether you build a corporation, a big corporation, private, or eventually a lot of people are build them so they can go public, on the stock exchange. And so you have to know all of those and the rules and regulations of all of those. The second thing you have to know is your organization, of course. Organization means not only do you need a good accounting system, but you have to know how to keep track of things. For instance, you have to know how to keep track of if you drive for a living, you have to keep track of your mileage. But you have to do it in a particular way, or the IRS will come along and say, you didn't keep the proper records, you can't deduct that, which could cost you hundreds and hundreds of dollars. You have to know things about depreciation. You have to know things about basis, because these are the tools a good tax professional can use to mitigate your taxes. But if you don't keep the proper records and if you don't keep track of all this properly, then whoever you hired to do that for you is not going to have the data they need to do it properly for you. So and that's a thing that I've had to teach people also. So, and the third, of course, is the taxes, because there's a different tax structure for each type of legal format, and you have to know the balance there. When it's time to start, maybe as small as a sole proprietor, to test out your theory of going there, and then and if your business gets larger to a certain point, then it may be more advantageous to change your legal format to something else to mitigate the overhead and mitigate the tax responsibilities of that. So you change one, it's going to change another one, back and forth. So that's why I say they're the three pillars, and they all work together. And you have to know how they work together. And the more you know how they work together, the more profitable you're going to be, because you're not giving money away or wasting money you don't have to.
Wow, wow. Amazing, amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. So many entrepreneurs think hiring a CPA is enough. Why do you believe owners themselves need to understand tax and accounting basis?
That I get that all the time, because I'll talk to people about all this stuff, and they says, "Well, I don't have to learn all of this stuff. I'll just go out and hire a CPA and have them do all of it for me." And so I ask them, "Well, did you interview the CPA before you hired them?" And usually I get a blank stare, and they eventually say, "No." And so I say, "Well, if you owned a plumbing business and you were going to hire a plumber for your business, would you interview that plumber to see if they knew anything about plumbing and how good they were and whether they were going to be good for your business?" Of course you would. Same thing. If you owned you were an electrical contractor, you interview people before you hire them. I don't care. If you've got a McDonald's, you hire somebody if you know they're going to be a good employee for you. And the same thing is if you hire a CPA or a tax accountant, you should do the same thing. Well, how do you interview them if you haven't learned the basics yourself? You wouldn't know if they'd be good or not. You absolutely wouldn't. That's why I say so you can't push it off on somebody else. Absolutely, as you grow your business, you need to be bringing CPAs and tax people, and I advise that they're different people. A lot of people, because for most people, CPAs, at least in this country, the tax part is a side business. That's not their main bread and butter. They just make extra money at tax times. And you wouldn't believe the mistakes I've had to straighten out from CPAs because they don't care about that. That's not their bread and butter. But they love the extra income during tax time. Fine. And that's fine if they go out and they study taxes and they keep up on all the tax laws, which are constantly changing and everything else. So I advise people, well, I think, bring a CPA, do all the accounting stuff, then get your P&Ls from them and go to somebody else and do their taxes. And I have a lot of clients will do that. They'll bring their PLs and I'll go through them and I'll start asking questions. Well, this doesn't make any sense what the CPA did. Something's wrong here. You need to go back and find out what they did wrong because these numbers don't make any sense. And so that's always a good idea. But you need to learn the basics of this stuff. You don't need to become an expert in accounting. You don't need to become an expert in legal formats or taxes or anything else. But you do need to learn the basics so that you can go in, you can interview these people. One thing that really aggravates me to no end is that these CPAs that says, well, drop your stuff off, I'll call you when I'm done. And I tell people, you get a CPA that tells you that, you run the other way because they don't give a damn about your business. A good accountant, a good tax professional is going to sit down with you and have you an interview with you every single year to see what where your business is. For me to be good at a good tax professional, I have to learn people's businesses. I have to know how a painting business or a landscaping business or a plumbing business or whatever it is, how they run, And because I have a business background, I have a basis of how all that is, but still I have to learn what they want and what they also want to achieve. I was doing, for a decade there, I did a paint company. He started with just himself, and 10 years later he had, I believe, 8 crews going out and doing over $1 million a year. But one of his goals during that time was to buy a certain house that he was currently renting, and he wanted to buy it. But it's hard for the bank to give you a mortgage if you work for yourself, So he needed 3 years of P&Ls that were within a profit of this and this to qualify for the particular type of loan he wanted. So we sat down and we put down a program, a 3-year program together on how he could do this from a tax standpoint. And we did it, and he got his house. Those are the things I love to do. But this is what a good professional will do for you. They will sit down, they will find out what your dreams and aspirations, where you want to go with your business, and then advise you properly to achieve that. That's the type of person you want on your team. And you can't find them unless you know the basics. This is why I call all my various endeavors mastering business basics. I'm not here to make anybody an expert. I'm here to make them think. First of all, that's what my podcast is about. You got to think about this. Think about this. You got to examine yourself and think about this. And I call it mastering business basics. And with it, I give you a basic information so that you can go out and you can find the right people for your business and put together that team that's going to help you succeed at whatever level you want to succeed.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you. I think it really speaks volume to knowing the basics really save you a whole lot when actually hired. hiring those who is going to kind of who is going to be your CPA, and that's who is going to be handle your task too. I think it's very very key, just the way you said. Even if I don't know much about task yet, and I'm still learning from it, but this just actually more like triggers me to actually look forward to kind of learning a whole lot of basics so that I wouldn't get to fall victim of a similar mistake that you just make reference of. How do business structure choice like LLC or corporates impact taxes and long-term growth?
How they're different? Are you saying?
Yeah, how do business structure like the LLC uh, or corporate impact tax or long term?
Well, there's a lot of confusion in this country about LLC. People think it's a corporation, and it's not. It stands for limited liability
Yeah.
company. And it used to be prior to and it's a state designation, not a federal designation.
Oh.
It's a state designation. And all it does is it takes, before the LLCs, the limited liability companies, if you owned a sole proprietorship, which has just got the one
Yeah.
owner, or a partnership, a general partnership, which is many owners, people could sue you, your business, and they could attach your personal assets. And that's why a lot of people were forming corporations, simply because they had liability protection. So what the LLC designation does, you go to the state and you form an LLC, and that gives your sole proprietorship and your general partnerships the same type of limited liability that the corporations have.
Oh.
That's all it does. It doesn't change taxes, anything else,
Oh.
because the federal government doesn't accept that. All it
Hmm.
does is give you limited liability. So if somebody sues your business, they can't come and attach your personal, unless they can prove fraud or something like that.
Wow, wow, wow. This is really eye-opening. It's the fact that you just make reference of when it comes to taxes, there's no difference between the LLC and the sole proprietorship. It's only more like safeguard your belongings, being that none of those things will be taken away when it comes to legal issue. Wow, amazing. So what are some warning signs that a business uh, doesn't have a solid foundation in place?
The first sign I always look at is how well they keep their accounting. You know, because if you don't keep track of all the pieces, then you're heading for disaster right there. You know, the second thing I always look at is, well, on their where are they at on their journey? Where are they at? Most people start out small. Over 75% of the businesses in this country, if not more, are small business people. I think it's probably closer to 90. And that's why it's so important. But over 75% of them fail. It's crazy. It's crazy. And because they don't know, they don't keep track of things. They don't have anybody to teach them, and it's a shame. But it boggles the mind. It really does. But I was in the same situation when I was in my 20s and 30s. I just say, well, I could do this, and I went out and I did it well. But I didn't know how much money I was making or anything else. I just knew I had money in my pocket to pay the bills, and that was all that was important. And it's more than that if you want especially if you've got a family and everything. If you're single, you can get away with things. But when you've got a family and other responsibilities, you really need to have it together and do it properly.
Wow, amazing. Thanks for that. So, in your experience, what are some of the most common task mistake small business owner make?
I think the biggest problem is they're so concentrating on getting clients, and they're so concentrating on bringing in the money, that they don't pay attention to the structure.
Hmm.
That is the biggest problem. And if you don't pay attention to your structure and how it's set up, you can make money. You're going to waste so much of the money you bring in that you're not going to be profitable. And that's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. These are things that people. I always say that I teach the things that nobody wants to learn. You know, but they're probably more important than all
Yeah.
the other things. I don't teach marketing because I'm lousy at marketing. I
Yeah.
really am lousy at marketing. That's what I need to get better at. But that's the way it is. you got to have the structure. You got to learn the structure, or you got to bring people in that know the structure, and you got to learn the structure to bring the people in to handle the structure. It's just that's the way the world works. And the people that are successful, if you look at all of the successful business people in the world, they know those things. They know those things, and they know how to use them, and they know how to bring in the right people to take care of it. So they don't have to. They can go on to the next thing and concentrate on the next thing or the next product or whatever, the next service or whatever the case may be.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah, thank you very much for that. So how can trade people, trade entrepreneurs, painters, electricians, cleaner, legally reduce their tax burden? How can they reduce their tax burden?
How can they? I didn't quite catch the last
Yeah,
part.
I
They
said,
didn't
so
what
how
now?
can trade people who are into painting, carpenter, or painters, cleaners, legally reduce their tax burden?
Okay. How can I'm sorry, I just couldn't catch
Yeah,
the last word you
yes,
said.
the last word is more like how can they reduce their tax burden legally?
Oh. How can they? Uh, how can they find a tax prefer or evade or lower their tax bill?
Yeah,
Do you
reduce,
mean
yeah, lower it.
reduce the
Yeah.
taxes? All right. For let me get this take a story. This is a good story because this is how you can do it. This is what I do anyway. I had a lady come to me for the first time. She had decided to quit her corporate job and become a home chef. And she's one of these. They go into your home and they prepare the entire meal for all of your
Yeah.
guests and everything. A home chef. And her first year, she made $100,000 profit. I mean, that's
Yeah.
amazing. You know, that was she's very good. She's even got her own little TV show now. But she was going to owe over $6,000 in taxes, and because she was running the thing as a sole proprietorship. And the taxes are of all the legal formats, sole proprietorships are some of the highest taxes there are. And so she came to me early enough in the year. And like I said, a good tax professional is the one that knows all the exceptions. All right. I was able to use one of the exceptions to the tax law to roll her from a sole proprietorship into what we call an S corporation, which is a limited corporation structure. The end result is it changed the tax structure to the point where instead of a $6,000 bill, she got a $2,000 refund.
Ooh.
I was able to save her $8,000 by knowing the law and putting her in a situation. That's why I say is as you grow your business, you have to know all the different legal formats and all the tax consequences of legal formats, not where you live. You can't get away from taxes and death. You just can't. And that's why it's important to find somebody that knows these things.
Wow.
That's what that's what the big corporations do when you think of it. They hire all of the enrolled agents and the top master tax advisors out there to sit and figure all this stuff for them, so they can reduce their tax liabilities. And then you hear people complain all that, well, the corporations don't pay taxes. Well, of course they pay taxes, but they don't pay any more taxes than the law allows. And that's what's important.
Wow. Amazing. I think we need a bit of education in this particular aspect. So what should every entrepreneur knows before hiring an accountant or tax professional?
Well, what should they know?
Yeah.
They need to learn the legal formats and the basic taxes, the tax consequences of those, and how to put together the paperwork for their CPAs. And once they know that, then they need to go out and they interview people. You should interview them just like you would interview any other employee. You're hiring them to do a job for you. You need to interview them. And it's amazing that people don't. They just take a recommendation. Uncle Joe said that, hey, I know this guy over here. Why don't you go see him? Well, that could be fine. He may be good for somebody else. He may not be the right person for you. He may not work with you like you want somebody to work with you, to create a relationship or anything. I mean, if you're the type of person to just drop it off and call me when you're done, fine. There's plenty of people around like that. If you want the type of person that's going to sit down with you and work with you to help you grow your business and help you give the proper advice so that you can do that, you need to be able to interview them
Yeah.
and you need to educate yourself so you can.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So how often should business owner actually meet with their tax advisor or accountant?
So how
How
now?
often should they actually?
How
Yeah.
often? Oh, that's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that question. A lot of people think that once a year is enough, and it is not. The minimum should be twice a year. And the reason is, of course, most tax structures are calendar years for most businesses. And you should be at least doing it twice a year. I reckon, of course, in the period of January through April is the tax season here in this country. But you should also be sitting down in the October time frame with your tax account also and say, okay, this is my P&L year to date. Okay, is there anything I need to do between now and the end of the year to mitigate my tax liability for next year? Is there any changes I can make? Don't wait until the year's over and say, oh, I wish I would have done that. You need to be, and some larger companies, they'll sit down 4 times a year, quarterly, and go over the P&Ls with their tax professionals. But for small businesses, I had been at least twice a year, in the March to April timeframe usually, and in the October-November timeframe, so that they get a good handle on what they do. That's the best way.
Wow, amazing. So you have seen hundreds of entrepreneurs lose thousands of dollars. What is the biggest lessons from those stories?
Well, the lessons I've learned from them is I had to explain to them why they did it, why they got in this situation. And so I had to get better at it myself. And I had to get better at explaining things in ways that people can understand. That's why when I wrote my book, I says, I want to write this so that the ordinary person can understand it. I don't want to write it in IREs or accounting terminology or anything else. I want to write something so that the average person just starting out can understand what I'm talking about. That's important. And that's one of the biggest things I've learned over the years in working with people.
Wow, thank you so much. So how can better financial education create long-term freedom for entrepreneurs?
It's going to let you keep more of your money.
Hmm.
That's probably the most important thing.
Yeah.
And the more successful you are at that, then the larger your business can run and the more you're going to be able to put back for retirement. It all works together, but it has to start someplace at the very bottom. And that's what I call the foundation.
Wow. Wow. Foundation. Yeah, thank you. So if someone is just starting out, when it comes to tax and accountants, what is the first step they need to actually more like take towards securing themselves and building structures?
As far as the account goes, I think the accountants, I mean, a good accountant is really will help you for your business a lot. But you have to be able to sit down and you have to have an interview with them. You have to talk to them. They have to be the kind that'll talk to you sit down with you whenever you need to talk to them. And a lot of times smaller firms are better in that aspect when you're starting off. Don't go off with a large tax firm. You're a number to them. You want to find an account that you're a person to them, not a number to them. And sometimes that's hard to do. And if you have to interview 6 different accountants to find that one that is interested in you as a person and interested in your business as a business and helping your business succeed, then interview 6 people. It's your money you're spending hiring this person.
Yeah.
Make sure you have the right one. You know, and if it takes time, it takes time.
Yeah, thank you. So at the end of the day, what do you hope your legacy would be in the life of entrepreneurs you have actually helped?
Ah, I always say, well, if I can help, I've come to the point in my life that I've learned something. Life is not about physical stuff. It's not about how much money you can amass. It's not about how successful you are. At the end of your days, the only thing that you can sit back and say to really have any satisfaction, I think, is how many people's lives have I improved along the
Mm,
way? And this is why I'm doing all of this. This is my why. I want to just, for the rest of my life, see how many people's other lives I can improve while I'm still here.
wow, this is so touching. Yeah, thank you, Roger. This is really amazing. So, if you had to leave my audience with your final words in respect of tasks or respect of tasks and life, and what is it going to be like?
So, what was a
Yeah,
good? What was a good?
more like your final words for them.
Oh, my final
Yeah,
words. Oh my goodness. My final words is always the same. Educate yourself.
it's cute. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Roger. So, Roger, tell us how can my audience connect with you? How can they learn more from you? And how can they do business with you?
I have a corporate website. The creative part of me, I get to design my own websites.
Oh,
It's yeah, my company name is called Seagull Technologies. Seagull is like the bird, Seagull Technologies, which is pearl.com. And it's got links to everything I do. There's a lot. There's links to my books, to my podcast, to the online courses. There are lots of free articles out there. There's a blog out there. If you just want to educate yourself, there's a ton of stuff to do there, and to learn there. I just put it all together.
wow, wow, amazing. And before we go, tell us a little about your book, some of those writings you have done, so that my audience could actually more like grab some of them. And yeah, just tell us about some of the title and some of them. And
Well, the yeah, my book is called Mastering Business Basics, the workbook, and it goes into the three pillars. The first book, the first part of the chapter goes into all of the traits that a good businessman needs to have. It goes into, if you don't know what kind of business you are, here's how to go about finding the right business for you. Once you have that, then here is the traits that you're going to have to say, if you don't have them, that you need to learn to properly run a business. And then it goes into the three different pillars and how they interact with each other. And I've put in it's a workbook. There's places in it where you can write yourself notes. There's lines all over the place where you can write yourself notes and everything. It's meant to be a workbook that you can use. And I you can probably read it several times and get something new every single time. But there's a lot of stuff in there.
wow, wow, amazing. Yeah, Roger, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experience with us today. Your insights on building a solid foundation, protecting profits, and understanding taxes are lessons every entrepreneur, whether in trade or beyond, needs to hear. For our listener, if you want to dive into Roger's work, you can actually grab his free reports at cgottechnology.com/free, where you will also find resources, educational courses, and consulting service to help you strengthen your business. As always, thank you for tuning into the Aro Benaiah Show. If you find value in today's conversation, share this episode with your fellow entrepreneurs and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss inspiring stories of practical insights. Until next time, keep building, keep learning, and keep growing. Once again, it's good to have you on the show, Roger.
Thank you.